Hey, folks, Quilly here, and welcome to I played Sid Meier's Civilization VII for 3 hours over at the Firaxis headquarters. Once again, I was not allowed to record my own footage. This is B-roll footage that was sent to me by Firaxis, but by happy coincidence, it happens to be running Hatshepsut as Egypt, which is exactly who I played as. We can see here that we are, for the first time, making some choices regarding to some of our culture and civics, including our government choice over here. You can see the government works a little bit differently than some of the things we've seen before. This note in the top in particular is quite important. Each government gives a set of choices during a celebration. The celebration system is tied into the happiness mechanics. I don't know 100% sure. I can't tell you exactly how it works. I believe what you're doing is accruing a certain amount of happiness per turn. That is then triggering a celebration once a certain amount is accrued. But you will get a choice. I chose actually the Cultural Republic myself when I played, so that whenever a celebration happened early on, I was using it to generate even more culture, but then later on I used it to give me bonuses to wonder production because I was going for, I was going to say the cultural victory, not the victory thing exactly. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but rather the cultural age progression was what I was really focusing on, which meant I was working on a lot of wonders. I believe this player here though is going to click on oligarchy, which seems pretty good. I mean, food and building construction is pretty nice in the early game. That is pretty substantial. And here we get to see where we choose our actual policies. Now, as you progress through the game, you will get a differing number of policy slots over here. We just start out with the one, but you are going to unlock quite a few of them, even through the Antiquities Age. I think by the end of the Antiquities Age, I was running half a dozen? 7 maybe? Something like that. I'm not sure, but quite a number of them. And we get our policies over here that you can slide in. Currently, they've just unlocked their first civic tech. So the only choices are charismatic leader, giving them culture at the palace, or tool making, which is giving them production and science in the palace. The palace is the building that exists in your starting city, your capital. So we get a couple of choices on where to go over there. You click it, you slot it in, and you get your build your own government style mechanics, similarly to how we've got in Civ 6. Next section that we've got in this B-roll footage is on independent powers. So independent powers are sort of the city-states, but not exactly, because they don't start as city-states. There are no city-states at the start of the game. Instead, you get these independent powers, but they can grow to become proper and full city-states if you nurture them. Or, if you're in the game that I played, Amina just goes around and like eliminates them all, and then you don't get to play with the city-state mechanic yourself in your particular game through. Amina's quite aggro. I had some, this is the person I warred against. I started near Ashoka and he got obliterated by Amina very quickly. So my particular game was myself as Egypt. We had Rome, who was my great buddy throughout, and Amina, who was a big old jerk face that I went to war with a couple of times, including with Rome. We did a sort of a joint war together. We did an alliance and we beat up Amina, and it was great. It was wonderful. I will say this. One of the things I have complained about previously for Civ 5 and Civ 6 is that I never really felt strongly invested in the diplomacy. Now, that might be my own particular playstyle and it may be a mistake, but I never really felt like I needed to or wanted to really interact diplomatically a lot with some of my neighbors. The most is like, well, I'm going to sell off my excess luxuries for a few dollars here and there. And also, while we're talking about that, how annoying is it to try to like play around with the trade table to be like, will you give me 27 gold? What about 28 gold? 29? Oh, that's too much? Okay, I'll go back down to 28. That sort of fiddly interaction no longer exists in Civ 7. The diplomacy mechanic is changed dramatically. So here they're showing us a few of the different little intro screens in addition to this mechanic over here. So one of the resources we have in this game, we can see our resources in the top left corner. I mean, gold, as expected, sure. Science rate, culture rate, sure. This happiness meter that fills up. This over here is our settlement limit, which I guess we haven't talked about yet. We might talk about it a little bit more, but this is sort of the limit on how many cities you can spam out. Every version of Civ has tried to figure out some sort of mechanic for limiting maybe how many cities you can have in various ways, right? In Civ 4, you had the corruption mechanic where city maintenance would go up exponentially per city that you had. In Civ 5, you had global happiness. Civ 6 didn't really have it the same way. And then here we've got the settlement limit. Now, that's not a hard limit. You can go over it. You start to lose you start to develop inefficiencies from it. You can increase the settlement limit afterwards in a variety of different ways as well. This isn't something that I really explored that deeply in the Antiquities Age, so I can't really comment too much on what it means to exceed it or tweak it or various things like that. But we do have this influence value over here, which is how we use to interact with other civilizations in a variety of ways. So here on our first meeting, we've got the option of our tone when meeting this character here. I think in this case, they are playing as Rome and they are meeting Hatshepsut in this particular example. Yeah, it must be Rome because this is Roman cities. Actually, if I pop open my Photoshop over here for just a second, we can talk about the different look of things. So this is an actual in-game view of an Egyptian city over here. And if we look at the Egyptian cities, we can see these sort of square buildings. I'm at 200% zoom over here, so we're getting a little bit of pixelation. But we get these sort of square buildings where if we compare to this Mayan city, now this is not a like a normal top-down screenshot. This is more of a cinematic mode screenshot, but we can see these little thatched roof buildings. And if we take a look at the Mongolian cities over here, we get these green tiled roofs. And if we take a look at a Roman city, we get these brown tiled roofs. So every city, all the buildings have their own unique look. Lots of extra art assets have been put into this game. Flipping back over here. So yeah, Roman cities in the background. So they're playing Rome, they're meeting Hatshepsut, and they're going to choose what they want to say. They can be neutral, which costs 0 influence. They could also go and take a hostile greeting, which costs some influence and lowers relationship. Presumably this is a way you can help make people just be more, maybe more aggro to you and get them to start the wars and save you some resources. There's an interesting thing with the influence thing when a war starts that we'll see, I think, a little bit later in this video here. And then the other thing you can do is you can spend 20 influence to do the friendly greeting, which will reveal each other's capitals, but also give you a 20% boost in your relationship. Then if we move forward, I think we'll see some more diplomacy in just a moment over here. So that in Civ 7, I felt that diplomacy mattered right from the start. And it uses what I often talk about when it comes to strategy games. And I've used this when talking about all kinds of different strategy games. Strategy games are all about giving the player meaningful and important decisions. One of the arguments one could say about getting rid of builders and workers is that they weren't meaningful and important decisions. They were sort of tedious, usually obvious and elementary decisions, and therefore maybe didn't represent as much fun. Some of the diplomacy interactions in the past may have felt that way here. Here I feel like they might be a little bit more meaningful, but again, with only playing through the Antiquities age, we only get so much of an impression about things. Here we get a look at the tech tree. This is limited to the Antiquities age again, but we've got a number of techs. You'll also notice these little mastery options over here. Some technologies, when you research them, have an option for you to master that technology afterwards. Now, unfortunately, they don't mouse over any of these to give us a tooltip in this particular video, which is a darn shame. But one of the things I believe that happens with these masteries, I think that's what this icon here represents, is I think these are codices. This is a codex, and codices are one of the ways that you can progress through the scientific age progression, the sort of quasi-victory condition. You almost, it's, you know what, I don't know if I properly had the thought about until just now, but basically it almost feels like you can pursue a victory condition 3 times in Civ 7, I think is the way it's going to feel, right? Normally, it's just at the end of the game, you're doing your scientific victory where you're going to space, or you're doing your cultural victory with your tourism things, or you're doing a religious victory, or one of those things, or your military one. Well, you're kind of going to get to do that 3 times in that in each age, you're going to be progressing down these legacies. And we're going to see that later in this B-roll footage for sure. That's going to unlock bonuses that carry you through the rest of the game in really nice ways. And you're not locked in. You could start off, you could do cultural stuff in the early age and then switch to scientific victory later on. You could pursue multiple things simultaneously. You're not locked in different ways, but you are rewarded for doing well in various categories in these different ages in ways that, give you that little endorphin rush in your brain, right? Every time something goes well. Well, by mastering these technologies, this is one of the ways that you can progress down the scientific victory tree, and it also gives you some extra innate bonuses. I don't remember what they are. Again, I couldn't record my own footage for this, and it's not highlighted in this video, but one could imagine perhaps that like mastering writing maybe makes your library slightly better, for example. So, we've also got the civic tree over here. So just like with Civ 6, we've got the tech tree and the civic tree happening at the same time. So this is the Antiquities civics tree. But you'll notice there's a second tab over here for Egyptian culture. Each culture that you pick, your civilization has its own little mini civics tree that you can also progress down, which will have some unique bonuses that will carry you forward in the game. This is already being your legacy of your starting civilization as you move forward. So we looked at the arrival of Hapi and the scales of Anubis earlier in the video. We were able to see those in a previous video. But then we've got the the Light of Amun-Ra over here. So more gold on the palace, +1 settlement limit. So we were talking about, right, your settlement limit, how many of these settlements that you can plop down before you start to get some production penalties. Kemet, bonus culture, navigable rivers. So there's a lot, the Egyptian stuff really does seem to have a lot of navigable river stuff, which makes sense. I mean, we've got, the Nile River was an important thing for Egypt, so let's go ahead and emphasize that. That's really cool. And then the ability to build pyramids as well, which feels really nice. I will note, if we just back up over here for a second, you'll notice this little blue up arrow over here by Hatshepsut's icon. We're going to take a look at that, I believe, later in this B-roll footage. This is how you actually level up your leader itself. Oh, yeah, leader attributes. That's what we're going to talk about. And diplomacy. Perfect. We're going to be on theme for this video. So it looks like we're going to start with some diplomacy, and we've got a few buttons that we can click over here. Let me talk about these before we talk about this clearly who's playing. So this is Hatshepsut, and they're about to declare war on Rome. So we'll take a look at that in a second. Before we do, let's look at these other interactions. And here's what I thought was really fun and really made me feel like it was worth investing in a good relationship with a neighbor early on. In particular, these endeavors, which feel really neat. Now, I don't have these values memorized, and of course they could change between now and release, so whatever the numbers were in the demo that I played, in a sense, kind of irrelevant because we don't know what it's going to be at release. But this cultural exchange, the way it works here is you spend 60 of your influence to propose a cultural exchange with your neighbor. So here it would be Hatshepsut. We are proposing a cultural exchange with Augustus of Rome. And this cultural exchange is going to be this. Again, I may be 100% right about these numbers, or I may be making them up. But I would propose with Rome this cultural exchange, which would make it so that me, as Hatshepsut, would gain 4 culture per turn in each one of my cities. And then Rome would get 2 culture per turn in all of their cities. I have spent influence to get this started. I get the bigger benefit from it, but Rome still benefits. They could refuse, which would cancel this exchange. I believe I get refunded my influence if they refuse. It also worsens our relationships. Rome could also accept, in which case they will get some amount of culture per turn, and I will get more culture per turn. The other thing Rome could do is they could invest their own influence, a lesser amount. I think 20 was what it was when I was playing. So when I was being offered a deal, I would get these choices. I could refuse, I could accept, or I could support. And by supporting, I would spend some amount of influence. And what it would do is it would increase the total value on both sides and make them equal. So I believe with the cultural exchange, again, if they accept, I would get 4 culture per turn, they would get 2. If they support, we would both get 6 culture per turn from this cultural exchange. And I really like that kind of prisoner's dilemma, sort of mutual, sort of tit for tat, min-maxing kind of vibe that feels really good in here. And I found it very satisfying. I think open market opens up more trade route possibilities, which are quite good. Trade routes are ways they're a little bit more, in a way, a little bit more tangible, because rather than just getting some flat amount of gold or something like that, you were actually importing resources, like luxury resources and things with these trade routes. That seems very powerful. And I think trade's going to be very strong in Civ 7. Again, only got kind of a basic kind of introduction to it in here with the 3 hours of gameplay and only Antiquities era, but I think it's going to be very important. Well, notice we can also do sanctions that are possible as well, if we want to make things worse, and denounce as well, but we've got a few different buttons that are interactable. But here, Hatshepsut is going to declare war on Augustus, and we're going to see a different impact of influence. So you can see it here, declare war. This will declare a surprise war, since you do not have a hostile relationship. They will gain 150 influence. So because the surprise war, it costs 0 influence to do, but your target will gain influence because they're being declared on in a surprise. It's very unjust, so they're going to get more diplomatic clout from this. Not only that, they're going to start with some initial war support, which we're going to see in just a second as we go to the next screen here. So they're going to declare war. Clicky, clicky. There you go. We got a little bit of... he is shocked. And they're going to open the war details here. And this war detail screen, I think, is going to be very exciting. Come on, open it. Thank you. Okay, so Hatshepsut's War, named after her. She started it. Sure, fair enough. And you can see here that Rome has started with 3 supports. So they get +3 versus 0. And we've got an option to support yourself over here, right? We can spend influence to add support to our side. And these are envoys that cause war weariness and reduce production and combat strike. So because of they've got more war support on their side, we would be getting war weariness and exhaustion, which makes sense. I mean, we started it. We didn't have a good reason for it. It kind of makes sense that our people would be like, what the heck, man, this isn't right. But by spending this to support ourselves, we can get a little support over here, and we can reduce the differential between these two and, you know, tweak some of the balance of this pain. And that's fine. That's cool. Here's this is what I think is even more exciting. This is a different situation. Here, this player is playing as Augustus, and they just clicked on themselves, and you can see ongoing war. So there's currently in this particular game a war going on between Ashoka and Amina, and Rome, who is not involved in this war, can choose to support one side by sending an envoy there, and this will change the balance of the war support in this war. Apparently, so I don't think this didn't look like it cost any influence, but you can only put support one time on one side of the war. Apparently, in earlier builds, you could support one side of a war multiple times by spending influence, and apparently it was like insanely OP and broken. And in their multiplayer sessions, they did some really abusive stuff with it. So that quickly got changed to, okay, each civ can only support the war one time, but presumably it looks like for free. And I like that because, especially being free, there's kind of no reason not to do it. And you're going to be more interested and involved in other people's wars. You're going to be rooting for one in a much more significant manner. Because normally in Civ, when a war happens, usually you're happy that your enemies might be expending resources on each other. That's good. You might be hoping that the stronger enemy doesn't win and therefore start to snowball. But how much can you really do to affect it? Rather, you know, without going and joining the war yourself, right? Declaring a war here. But here you can provide this sort of soft support to the war effort, which is so realistic historically and even in modern times that I think that is really cool. Man, my videos are just going to keep getting longer on this little thing. That seems fine too. Yeah, here we can see a few more interactions. Yeah, the open borders. We can do these sanctions over here. You can pause to see those tooltips, but we can see a few more military or diplomatic interactions that are possible. Okay, we're going to pause here, actually, and in the next video, we're going to talk what they're about to do is they're going to go and level up Augustus here by giving them a permanent new leader trait and tweaking Augustus in a way that will continue through the ages, through until the end game over here, unlocking permanent bonuses, and it's very exciting. But I want to go and put a cut in here. We're going to continue it in the next episode and be focused on that. Again, hey, hopefully you are subscribed to the channel. Hopefully you are hitting a like and dropping a comment because it's really good for the YouTube algorithm and makes such a massive difference to the channel. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.